The boats that are being destroyed are not fishing boats. Fishing boats don't have multiple high-powered outboard motors on them like we're seeing on these vessels. 3 and 4 high-power engines that cost, I've heard, anywhere from $60,000 to $90,000 a piece. A fisherman doesn't have motors like that, and he doesn't need them. You don't see the canopies on these boats that a fisherman would have to stay out of the sun while he's fishing. You don't see the riggings coming off of the boats that would hold fishing poles. You know, you know as well as I can do, Katarina, these are drug traffickers.
The opinions of the guests and host are their own and do not represent the opinions of Ironclad, the Border Patrol, or the Department of Homeland Security.
All right, I'm here today with Steve Murphy, a pretty notorious DEA agent. Steve, I'd love if you could give our audience here at Borderland Dispatches a little introduction of who you are and what you've done in a pretty impressive career.
All right. Well, what I am now is an old man, but still enjoying life. I spent 38 years as a police officer from 1975 to 2013. The last 26 was as a special agent with the Drug Enforcement Administration. My first assignment in 1987 was Miami, Florida. It was still the Wild West down there. I was a fish out of water. I was just really naive when I got down there. The most powder cocaine I'd ever seen at one time at that point was 2 ounces. The first undercover deal I did, we went to the Turks and Caicos Islands and picked up 400 kilos. I didn't know there was that much cocaine in the world at one time. So just shows you what it was. It was a learning experience. Spent 4 years there. Probably the most exciting thing was we got in a shootout in 1989 in Hialeah. Unfortunately, my partner was hit twice. He survived, but our informant was shot in the throat, and he never made it to the hospital. And I know it sounds stupid or silly to say that was exciting, but it was. It was an exciting time to be a DEA agent in South Florida. And man, if you couldn't make a drug case there, you needed to go find another career. It was just unbelievable. So while I was in Miami, I started working some cases with our offices in Barranquilla, money laundering cases. And at that time, I think my biggest knockoff was $1.3 million in cash. Nowadays, that could happen just about any day, but back then, that was a big, big deal. The agents down there started talking to me about potentially volunteering to go to Bogota or come to Barranquilla, actually. And so I talked to my wife about it, and she looked at me like I had 3 heads. And you got to understand, my wife is the type person, if you tell her what to do, it's not going to happen. But if you let her think about it and ask questions and so forth, and it took about 3 weeks, she came back. She said, "Were you serious about that?" And I said, "Sure." She said, "Well, hey, if we're going to do it, let's do it while we're young." So we were originally selected for Barranquilla. That transfer was rescinded a few weeks later because they needed a Spanish speaker immediately, and I wasn't. I had to go to language school. So I reapplied for Bogota a couple months later, got selected for that, went to language school, and in June of 1991, arrived in Bogota for a 3-year assignment. Stayed there until June 1994. When I got there, the very first week I was there is the week that Pablo Escobar surrendered to his custom-built prison, the Cathedral. And I thought, wow, that's a, obviously it's a big deal, but I thought, that's fantastic. The world's biggest manufacturer and distributor of cocaine is now in prison. But what I saw, and I got in the office on a Monday, and this was on a Thursday, I believe, and all I saw was disappointment and disgust, and the guys were angry. I'm like, what am I missing here? What's the downside? And they said, "You're new. You don't understand what you're talking about yet. You don't know what we've been through here trying to catch this guy. And you don't know the number of police officers, Columbia National Police officers that have been killed, our allies, our friends. You need to learn more about it before you open your mouth because we're so understanding at DEA." But that first year gave me the opportunity to work with Javier Pena, and his partner at the time was Gary Sheridan. So the 3 of us got together. They had been working on the Escobar case and the Medellin cartel for over 3 years. So again, that first year gave me an opportunity to review the case files, meet the Colombian police, learn everything about the investigation, so that a year later, when he pulled off his big escape, which is another joke. That night, the head of the Colombian National Police, the general, called our boss and said, I've just spoken to the president. We want Murphy and Pena in Medellin tomorrow. We're reestablishing the search block, the bloque de búsqueda, and we want these guys up here living with us, working with us until we capture this guy. So the next morning we come to the embassy and, the boss says, this is what you're doing. And we went back home and packed our bags. And for the next 18 months, we lived with the Colombian National Police in Medellin. And we all know that on December 2nd, 1993, the Colombian National Police located Pablo. They engaged him in a shootout and he was killed. So that was the end of his reign. That, I'm very proud of that. It was some of the most exciting things I've ever done in my life. We were going out on the helicopter gunships on operations every day. Again, getting shot at and shooting back, going on patrols in the mountains. Colombia's beautiful. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. But after we retired is when this show came out on Netflix called Narcos and just really blew it out of proportion. Everything you see on TV is not true. So, but it's led to some other opportunities for us. And one of those is being here talking to you today, Katarina. So thank you for having me on your show.
Thanks for being here, Steve. Look, you worked in Colombia, I would say, obviously, at one of the key times during the drug war. It was the height of it. But I really do believe, perhaps this is because I'm the one on the ground now, that we have reached another peak of the drug war. And we're seeing sort of miniature, civil wars break out in different regions that impact the war on drugs, drug trafficking, production, smuggling. So what we're seeing now, the approach, particularly from the US, and this is what my audience is really interested in, is really different. We're seeing strikes off the coast of Venezuela, and we just saw recently strikes off the coast of Acapulco in Guerrero, Mexico. Because you were boots on the ground, and your job was obviously very different than what mine is, which is I'm an observer and a storyteller. You were doing this tangible work to actually impact the war on drugs. What are your thoughts about the way this administration is approaching the drug war? And there's sort of this extrajudicial killings going on right now. It's textbook warfare.
Well, I tell you, thank you very much, because you're the first interview I've done where somebody's asked me that question other than on Fox or Newsmax or one of those stations. And it's getting to be almost, several times a week that they're calling. It's the hot topic today. The war on drugs, that term was created by Richard Nixon when he was president back in the early 70s, and that resulted in the creation of DEA, where the Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs merged with 1,000 customs agents and created DEA. Here we are. That was in 1972, I think, 72 or 73. Here we are in 2025, and there's never been a real war on drugs. There's been a lot of lip service given to it, but just like I just told you, going after the world's most wanted criminal, the world's first narco-terrorist, Pablo Escobar, what did the United States send to Medellin? 2 guys. That's not a war. It's a joke.
It's a cold war on drugs.
it was crazy. And I mean, we had tons of support. Our intel folks, other agents in country, other agencies, federal agencies, U.S. federal agencies. There's probably not an DEA agent in the world that wouldn't have traded places with us. I mean, everybody wanted to participate and cooperate. So we were getting a lot of backing, but that's still not a war. A war is where you come in and you get your allies together and you get your materials together and you have your strategic plans and you go in with an attitude to win. Well, all these years later, we haven't won anything. And please don't anybody think that I'm taken away from the proud men and women of law enforcement and the military, the first responders that are involved in this war on drugs, because they're brave enough to put a uniform on, or they're brave enough to go out there and work undercover. They're brave enough to pull off operations that most people in the United States would walk away from, that would be too scared to participate in something like that. They're offering their lives on a daily basis to protect you and me. So I'm certainly not taking anything away from them. I'm so proud of what they're doing, and I will I like to say I'll bleed blue till the day I die. But why are we sacrificing all these lives when we're just, Congress talks about it. It's the things we've been through over, especially since I retired in 2013. I've had the opportunity to speak to Congress, to the House of Representatives, and the American Legislative Exchange Conference. And this was, at the time, was primarily about counterfeit medications coming in from Mexico. It was shocking how they knew nothing about what I was talking about. And these are the people who are supposed to be putting the laws together to protect us as citizens of the United States. So it's just really disheartening. And I just got to say this right now. Can I stop paying my taxes because our Congress can't get a budget in place? Nobody's getting paid. So can I stop paying taxes until you guys decide to do your damn job and get back to work? Sorry. Side tangent.
No, it's
there.
all right. I think that when you are on the ground, as you and I have both experienced, it really changes your perspective on the war on drugs and also the policy and solutions that are being put in place to dismantle cartels or criminal organizations, right? Because we have a completely different view of this. And we also see, and you have probably seen, the mass amounts of collateral damage. So when you're hearing that these strikes are taking place, do you think that this is something that needs to happen? Okay, now this is textbook warfare. Do you think it's effective?
I think it's long past due. I'm not disappointed by anything that I've seen. I think as of today, there have been 10 strikes. Unless there's one today I haven't heard about yet. I know there's, I think we're 43 people killed now. You look at those boats, and you've got experience in the drug realm as far as investigations and reporting, and the boats that are being destroyed are not fishing boats. Before I joined DEA, I love to fish. I love to hunt. I haven't done any of it since I joined DEA, just because, your lifestyle becomes the job is what happens. But fishing boats don't have multiple high-powered outboard motors on them like we're seeing on these vessels. 3 and 4 high-power engines that cost, I've heard, anywhere from $60,000 to $90,000 a piece. A fisherman doesn't have motors like that, and he doesn't need them. They usually have a little outboard that you control with a throttle on the handle. You don't see the canopies on these boats that a fisherman would have to stay out of the sun while he's fishing. You don't see the riggings coming off of the boats that would hold fishing poles. As well as I can do, Katarina, these are drug traffickers.
It's interesting. This is why I wanted to have you on, because actually in my coverage since these strikes began, I have not agreed with the strikes because I am concerned that there are people on these boats who are not involved with drug trafficking. But it's, this is why I wanted to have your perspective, because you think that this is long overdue. Whereas for me, I'm like, well, 14 people on one boat off the coast of Acapulco, that seems like a pretty hefty team for a low-key maritime drug trafficking operation. And so then what comes to mind is, are there human trafficking victims on this? Are there migrants, etc.? Anyone that is perhaps not drug trafficking, but you're convinced that these are drug trafficking boats.
I am. It's I believe that the intelligence and the information that our government is collecting, I don't think it's fabricated. And I'm a conservative guy. I'll be the first to admit I'm not a Trumpster. I voted for him because the alternative was out of the question for me. I don't agree with everything he does. This is one of the first things that I do agree with. I believe that the information is legit. I hope that they don't divulge where the information is coming from, because I think all of our politicians are horrible at divulging secrets that just need to remain a secret. They talk about the CIA and what they're doing. Well, you're not supposed to know what the CIA does because they're covert. So is it coming from CIA? Is it coming from NSA? Is it coming from DIA? Is it coming from DEA? Is it coming from foreign partners, the Five Eyes community? I think it's coming from all of them. I think it's coming from not only wire intercepts, potentially human intelligence. But I think that they're doing, intel analysts are a lot smarter than the knuckle draggers. I was a knuckle dragger. I like kicking doors and having fun doing that, but they're the smart people. I think they have some extremely intelligent strategic analysts involved in this that are helping to provide information so that the final decision is made not with, well, I think this is what it is. The final decision is made, here's what it is, boss. That's Murph's opinion. I have no access to information that probably you would have, you don't have. I'm not getting information from any government agency. That's just based on my experience and what I'm seeing.
What I have noticed, and I can agree with you on this, is that the intelligence that's been gathered, particularly since January, on the cartels and along the southern border, has been pretty solid. Whatever federal agency we're talking about, whether that be DEA, FBI, NCTC. One thing that I found that kind of threw me for a loop with this situation is typically when this administration gets a hold of some major traffickers, narcos, or even just someone who's aiding and abetting a major cartel, we see that name and even typically that face plastered everywhere, okay, to the point where it becomes ingrained. I can literally picture the woman who was the first American citizen who received FTO charges for aiding and abetting the CJ&G, and she was based in Texas. We're not getting any names, any faces, or even any information on which cartels that these individuals on the boats are working for or smuggling for, or even which drugs were on that boat. Like, give me a first initial, a last name, and how many X amount of kilos of meth, coke, or fentanyl we're talking about. Don't you think that that differs typically from how the administration has operated in terms of big successful operations?
It does. It's, typically in the past, it's been the U.S. Coast Guard or the U.S. Navy acting on intelligence provided by DEA, FBI, HSI, all the government agencies, some from some of our foreign counterparts as well. And was handled the way it's always been handled. It's never been handled the way we're seeing now.
Yeah.
Where it's just an attack on a boat and that's it. I will say that I do not believe it's fentanyl coming out of Colombia or Venezuela. I think it's cocaine. I don't think it's meth coming out of there. I think it's cocaine. I would like for them to, if they want to support their argument, test the water around there. Because I don't know how close the ship is when they attack it because they're using helicopters and jets and
400
missiles.
miles off of the coast.
And so there's probably not a U.S. ship close by that could get there in time before the water dilutes the solution where the cocaine has been destroyed. I was thinking if they were close enough, maybe they could go test the water. You know what I mean? But then you got the semi-submersible, which resulted in 2 survivors. First of all, explain to me what purpose a semi-submersible has other than doing something illegal. The second is the boat had to be close enough to get in there to rescue them. And I don't know if it was a U.S. boat. It might have been a Mexican Navy. I
It was Mexican Navy.
Yeah, because I think I read something about them performing a humanitarian mission.
Yes.
So I'll say this also. The people on those boats are not the heads of these cartels. They're not even in management. They're not even in decision-making positions. These are mules. These are mopes. These are people that are willing to risk their lives for $500 or $1,000, whatever they're giving them. I mean, I don't know if you've been out in the open ocean. I have. I'm a landlubber. You get out in the middle of the ocean and you're looking at a radar screen, and the one we had was only going out 17 miles, and there's nothing out there. And I'm thinking, if something happens to our boat, I could swim a couple miles, but there's no way I could swim 17 miles, and I have no idea which direction to swim in. And other than using maybe a GPS. Of course, it's a lot more technical now so that they can stay on course. But I mean, they're literally risking their lives just by going out in the open ocean like that.
So an investigation, it's funny that you mentioned the hierarchy of who these individuals are on the boats. We know that they're not high-level cartel members. An investigation came out in the Boston Globe today that the administration has been arresting people for drug crimes, saying that they are high-ranking members of the Sinaloa cartel. And there were individual profiles on some of the people that were arrested, and truth be told, they were just kind of low-level drug dealers or even drug users. So, do you think that these strikes should be targeting these low-level figures, or should intelligence gathering be focused on major figures like El Mencho, Ryan Wedding, whoever else that's living freely in Mexico and beyond, and striking those locations? Because I would assume it's the same collateral risk, right?
To my knowledge, the mopes on the boats, and this was even before we started these attacks on the boats, do not carry weapons. I don't remember a single case where any of those folks had weapons on the boat, so they're not going to shoot back. Typically they stop, they try to blend in with the water. It's. I know everybody thinks it's real easy to go find one of these boats in the ocean. Have you ever noticed when somebody goes, when they disappear, they send out multiple aircraft to search the ocean, even when they have a general idea of where that person might be? It's almost impossible to find something in the middle of the open ocean. You got the waves, and if the boat's not moving, it's not creating a wake, so it's harder to find. I don't think we can look at it as, let's go for the hierarchy and let the mopes go. I think we need to take a total approach to taking them out. So that's not only going for the hierarchy that's in Mexico or Colombia or Venezuela, but also going for the strategist, the people that run the labs, the people that are in charge of the transportation routes, the people that are in charge of receiving the dope at the Mexican border before they cross it over the border in the United States, the gatekeepers. The different compartmentalized organizations throughout the United States. And then you've got the money laundering efforts to take the money back. I think we need to attack all of that at the same time. That's how you're successful. Because like you're talking about, if we just went for the hierarchy, how long does it take them to replace the boss? When Chapo,
the kingpin strategy is ineffective, point blank.
Exactly.
And you would know that better than anyone.
Exactly. It's funny because people say, my partner Javier and I, we travel. This is our 10th year, going into our 11th year of traveling around the world. We tell the true story about Pablo Escobar and all that. And we always have Q&A. And a lot of people say, do you think that you really had a positive effect on the world by killing Pablo Escobar? Well, we did. Lasted about 2 weeks. And then we saw the Cali cartel take over. We take them out, and then the North Valley cartel steps up, and then take them out, and then Don Berna with the Oficina de Envigado steps up. And here's the sad truth. Can you go on almost any street corner in the United States or Canada today and buy cocaine?
100%.
Absolutely. There's no question. So that's why I think you need to attack the entire organization. I think the goal would be, by taking these mopes out, is that, I guess I should stop calling them mopes, maybe call them the people that are on the boats. And I would think if I was them, I would say not no, but hell no. I'm not getting on another boat, not considering what the United States is doing now.
I agree. I think more than anything, the strikes are very much an incentive for the individuals that are running these operations, if that is the case here. But I've reported on this a lot. I don't think the kingpin strategy is effective, and I think that when we're going for those top guys, and that's why I wanted to hear what your thoughts are, because you take out El Chapo, you take out El Mayo, and it's a fucking hydra. You chop off the head and two more bigger, badder ones grow back. And
good
you obviously saw that during your career.
Yeah, it's so this is Murph's opinion, and Javier and I, we talk about this whenever we're doing our presentations and people ask the question. We're huge proponents of education, because the one thing that we're missing here is the demand for the illegal drugs in the United States, in Canada. And I mention Canada because I know you're from Canada.
Yeah, and I do significant reporting about this. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. But for me, it seems to me like especially in the U.S., we've become so permissive. It's okay for anybody to do anything. You want to do drugs and hurt yourself, that's fine. Well, who's going to take care of your sorry butt when you can't take care of yourself anymore? You're going to go on welfare, or your family's going to be responsible for you. I started working when I was 14 years old. I'm an old man now, and I'm still working. I think I work more hours now than I do when I was a DEA agent. And that was a lot of hours. But for what little bit my family has, we've suffered and we've worked and we've sacrificed to get that. Why should I have to give part of that, what we've earned, to these people who made a bad decision and now can take care of themselves? And I know there's an argument out there, functioning drug users, people go to work every day high on weed. There's functioning heroin addicts. Okay, well, not all of them are. The methamphetamine, this isn't real public knowledge, but I'll tell you this, Katarina, and your listeners. One of my sons passed away earlier this year from a methamphetamine overdose. He'd been a drug addict for 25 years, and we knew it was coming, and we tried to help him. We sent him to rehab 3 times. Well, he went to rehab twice. He was in prison twice, and then the next time, we convinced the judge to send him to rehab for a 3rd time, right? Because 3 strikes and out, you're outlaw. And so he agreed to go to rehab, and 3 days later, he's called his lawyer and says, "I'm not going to rehab, put my butt in jail." So I have a real passion, I guess, for trying to get the word out. I mean, I have a podcast, and you're going to be a guest on it soon. And the biggest reason I have that is to promote law enforcement, to promote the military, to promote first responders, those who are trying to make a difference in our world, that are not just sitting back saying, somebody ought to do something about that problem. Like you're bringing the atrocities that are going on in Mexico out into public, because we're so spoiled in our country. People are just like, "Oh, that doesn't really go on." Well, it does. We all know it does. This is one of my things I like. If I was king for a day or king for a year, I would require every American to go live in a 3rd world country for a year and then come back and tell me how much the United States sucks.
It's interesting because I think a lot of the people who are most critical of these topics and are very polarized on it, or even disagree with me most of the time, are the very people who have actually never stepped foot on the front lines and have never, seen the dead bodies and the kids walking by them to go to school, and growing up with this desensitized notion of what this war really looks like. You know, I'm really sorry to hear about your son. And I talk about this a lot, that addiction is a disease. And a lot of the times people view it as the very individual is the one suffering. There isn't any collateral, so they can do whatever they want to do, right? But it's a lot more nuanced than that. Honestly, anything that has to do with drugs, it's not black and white. It's nuanced. And when we're talking about addressing domestic issues, and this is a big stance of the administration, right? We're focusing on America. There's no troops in Afghanistan. We're looking at the drug crisis in America. I think one thing that a lot of people also kind of skip over is what else comes with this. So when we're talking about, okay, the cartels are bad because they supply drugs, the Americans are bad because they use them and there's an insatiable demand. But it's not just that. You probably know better than anyone what else comes with these criminal organizations: human trafficking, sex trafficking, mass murders. And so we're also seeing that there's a demand on the American side of the border for victims of human trafficking. So when you're looking at this in the broader picture, and you were to explain it to someone, especially if you were speaking to 2 polarized groups, what's the best way that you could kind of paint a picture for them that this isn't just Mexico's problem, this isn't just Colombia's problem, this isn't the US problem, but this is a multinational crisis?
Well, let's see. I hate to throw statistics out there. I'm working with a couple of groups now, Libertas International, which is based out of Medellin, which is an anti-human trafficking rescue group, but they also provide support to the victims afterwards through education, teaching them a trade, helping them to take care of themselves. There's another group, Aerial Recovery, who is based out of Nashville, Tennessee, that not only responds to natural and man-made disasters to help people, but they're also involved in providing, they've got a program called Heal the Heroes for military and first responders that suffer from PTSD or anxiety or depression. And then they have an arm that also goes and rescues human trafficking victims. So the CEO, before we started talking, I was editing her podcast, which comes out next week. And if you go on their website for Aerial Recovery, you can see some statistics on there. As of now, there are approximately 50 million victims of human trafficking, according to Aerial Recovery. I believe that number. About 5 or 6 weeks ago, I was asked to represent Libertas at the United Nations in Vienna, Austria, to speak on behalf of Libertas because the CEO is under so many death threats he couldn't go. What I saw there was over 600 groups had registered to participate in this symposium or conference, whatever they called it. But what I didn't see was cooperation. And I'm thinking, why do we have 600 groups doing the same thing? Why are you not all working together? And so during my little talk, that's one of the things that I suggested, being the new guy on the block. You always like to hear somebody voice their opinion who doesn't know their butt from a hole in the ground, right? And I said, I spent yesterday with all these organizations hearing their side, the coalition, they call them the alliance. And then today I'm here, you guys represent the United Nations, you represent all the member countries of the United Nations. And I'm seeing you talk back and forth, but what I saw is when the alliance was speaking, the guys from the United Nations were checking their phones, they were laughing to each other, they were looking at their watches. And, my suggestion to all these people was, why are you two not working closer together? You and the United Nations have the ability to push these countries to create laws to protect human trafficking victims, to give them a means of support afterwards until they can get their life back together. I mean, I can't imagine, the atrocities as well as I do. The atrocities that happen to these victims are unspeakable. I mean, I've interviewed people on my show that I had to stop the recording because I just broke down crying. If things like that don't break your heart, you're a cold son of a bitch. And these criminal groups they're called polycriminal for a reason. They're not just cocaine drugs organizations. They're not just human trafficking organizations. They're not just money laundering. They're not just counterfeit goods. It's called polycriminal because they'll go wherever they can to make a buck. I mean, the things that I've heard you talk about with what's going on in human trafficking on the Mexican border, the lady that created Aerial Recovery, her grandmother showed her a movie when she was 12 years old about a little girl that got human trafficked. And she said the thing she remembers about that movie is at the end, the little girl, this pervert comes and grabs her, and she's just begging with her eyes to please come help me. And then she dedicated, that's at 12 years old. Her name is Brittany Turner. Brittany decided then that she was going to dedicate her life to doing that. And let me tell you, she's doing it. She's an example for anybody and everybody. So I don't know if I answer your question. I tend to go off on tangents,
I appreciate
but it just
that.
makes you
I
sick.
think it's always important to talk about these organizations holistically because, like you said, and like my reporting shows, it's not just drugs. It is pretty much textbook terror. But thank you so much, Steve, for being here, being a guest on my podcast, and I'm excited to be on yours. I really appreciate your time and your insights, and I'm sure my viewers will too.
And I really appreciate the platform here. And I like the fact that we disagree, but that doesn't mean we have to be enemies, does it?
No, and I always appreciate when people disagree and when I can sort of try to understand or appreciate someone else's perspective, because I always tell viewers it's important to stay critical and, never get stuck in your own opinion, because it's like worse than having your own head up your ass.
I've been accused of that a few times, but thank you very much for having me on, Katarina. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Borderland Dispatches, an Ironclad original with yours truly, Katarina Schultz. As always, see you next time.
And now, a preview of Target Intelligence PSYOP.
One of the things that stood out is CIA's involvement in mainstream media and Hollywood. And I think a lot of people have suspected that over the years. You see a lot of comments and a lot of discussions about that. But this makes it even more real, because there's very specific examples of how they do that, how they approach, what the conversations are like, why they do it. And like we said in the documentary, this is just scratching the surface. This goes very deep.
And now, an exclusive preview of Target Intelligence PSYOP, Chapter 4, The Price of Admission.
I'm Sean Ryan. This is Target Intelligence PSYOP, an Ironclad original.
Maybe you won't believe what I'm going to say, but I swear it's the truth.
Chapter 4.
Go to the moon! Hollywood's got you.
The Price of Admission. During the time much of the world was shut down during COVID,
Breaking news, just COVID-19. A brand new coronavirus. A new normal.
Dr. Matthew Alford was at his home in the UK when he received a strange delivery to his door.
I think it was literally in lockdown. I was doing nothing in my life, as you can imagine, and I got a letter through the door, and it was from the CIA, and I thought, this is bizarre.
Dr. Alford is an author and lecturer of the University of Bath, who specializes in studying the relationship between the entertainment industry and the U.S. military. After opening the envelope, Dr. Alford found himself reading the personal emails of one of the most famous figures in Hollywood.
Why have I got a letter from the CIA? And why am I reading all of Ben Affleck's emails?
Then he remembered, 8 years prior to receiving the letter, he'd filed a Freedom of Information Act request, seeking to find out if the CIA had secretly worked on the 2012 film Argo. In the movie, which was also directed by Ben Affleck, Affleck plays a real-life CIA operative named Tony Mendez. In 1979, Mendez was part of an elaborate plot to evacuate 6 U.S. diplomats from Iran. After the United States Embassy in Tehran was taken over by Iranian Islamists, though 66 members of the embassy staff were taken hostage, 6 managed to evade capture and escape to the homes of the Canadian embassy officers. The CIA needed to figure out a way to get them out of the country while they hid with the Canadian embassy staff. Mendez's plan involved infiltrating the country by posing as Hollywood producers who wanted to film a big-budget movie in Iran.
I got an idea. They're a Canadian film crew for a science fiction movie. I fly into Tehran. We all fly out together as a film crew. I need you to help me make a fake movie.
So you want to come to Hollywood and act like a big shot without actually doing anything?
Yeah.
You'll fit right in.
Though the film was a hit and won an Academy Award for Best Picture, some critics were quick to point out the liberties Affleck seemed to take with the story of what actually happened. Many critics noted how the Hollywood film version seemed to inflate the role the CIA played in the rescue. The Canadian magazine Maclean's wrote, "The movie rewrites history at Canada's expense, making Hollywood and the CIA the saga's heroic saviors, while Canadian Ambassador Ken Taylor is demoted to a kindly concierge." In response to the criticism, in later versions of the film, Affleck would change the on-screen postscript text to read,
"The involvement of the CIA complemented efforts of the Canadian Embassy to free the 6 held in Tehran. To this day, the story stands as an enduring model of international cooperation between governments."
What Dr. Alford wanted to know is if the CIA itself was involved in Affleck's artistic liberties with the story. Dr. Alford is the author of the book National Security Cinema, the shocking new evidence of government control in Hollywood, and co-produced the documentary Theaters of War. He and his fellow researchers frequently submit Freedom of Information Act requests to learn about the CIA and the military's efforts to influence the movies and TV shows Americans watch. As it turned out, the CIA was very involved in supporting Argo.
And of course, it was that I'd put in a Freedom of Information Act request in 2012 that had taken over 8 years to come through. No one knew that there'd been actual contact between CIA and producers for that show until this information came through. So there are several of these shows that actually, whether they intended to cover it up or not, basically the information didn't come out that they'd been working on those, that they'd been working closely with the producers.
And, in many cases, the changes that the CIA and military branches were making to major blockbusters and TV shows weren't just minor tweaks to characters for accuracy. What Dr. Alford and his colleagues have uncovered is that in many cases, the military directly oversees key elements of mainstream entertainment. Dr. Alford uncovered that Affleck even visited the CIA headquarters to meet with key figures there in the lead up to the movie. However, documents Dr. Alford reviewed show that permission to film at the Langley campus was only given after several script reviews by the CIA. Emails between officials at CIA called the film a, quote, good news CIA story. In an interview with The Guardian leading up to the movie, Affleck acknowledged the primary similarity between what his job as a Hollywood director is and what the CIA does: deception.
One of the themes of Argo is about storytelling and how powerful it is, from political theater to the way we kind of communicate to our children to the way that we inspire people, and it's interesting that Hollywood and the clandestine services are both spend most of their time convincing people that something that's not true is in fact true.
He also added this half-joking observation.
I think probably Hollywood is full of CIA agents, and we just don't know it. And I wouldn't be surprised at all to discover that, this was extremely common.
But Affleck was already familiar with what it was like to work with the agency when he collaborated with them on Argo. He'd previously worked with them on the Jack Ryan film, The Sum of All Fears. His former wife, Jennifer Gardner, starred in the TV show Alias, where she played a super spy. The series was supported by the CIA, who worked closely with producers on it. Garner would even be featured in a recruitment video for future spies.
I'm Jennifer Garner. I play a CIA officer on the ABC TV series Alias. In the real world, the CIA serves as our country's first line of defense in the ongoing war against international terrorism. If you're an American citizen and seek a challenging, rewarding career where you can make a difference in the world and here at home, contact the agency.
But what Matthew Alford and his colleagues have discovered is the connections go deeper than most in the public can imagine.
The US military has worked with Hollywood producers for about 110 years or so.
As Dr. Alford explains, the military has long seen value in being able to affect how they are portrayed on screen.